Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Cherry Bomb. I'm Dalila Ali Raja.
I'm Gloria Bigelow.
Nikki Castor.
Tatum Durock.
And this week we are going to be talking about the art of quitting. When you know to get out, when you know to stay in, how do you do it? How do you extract yourself? What you going to do with it afterwards? How do you process afterwards? All of those things. Why are you making that face, Chloe?
Because I'm a quitter. I'll quit. I definitely, and I'm not necessarily very artful with it at all. Like I reach a breaking point, I'm just like, I'm out, and it's just, sometimes it's very jarring, even though I feel like I let people know that I'm on my way out. I don't know that they've always picked up those cues or understood me very clearly. So sometimes it looks like she just up and left,
I think
in relationships or in work situations?
Girl, it's in everything.
Okay, so across the board.
Like in life.
Yeah.
I feel like I warn in relationships. I for sure warn people because I want them to fix the thing that's making me want to leave. However, somehow all of the relationships that I have extracted myself from, somehow they will say they were clueless, even though I've maybe told them sometimes for years the same shit's the problem, or told them that this is not okay, I am not okay. When I actually leave for some reason, they're shocked. I don't understand. It's like I remember like with my ex-husband, there was a point I was literally curled up in the fetal position on the floor, sobbing, saying I can't do this anymore. And we stayed together for like another year or so. But then when I finally separated after that and after saying these things over, and he was still doing the same things, and he was shocked. I was like, I was on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what did you think this was going to happen? What about you all?
I also, in relationships or job, cut ties when intuitively it's a done deal for me.
How do you know? Like, what are your signs that it's a done deal?
So, like I said, I definitely trust my intuition, and it gets to a breaking point, and I can see that either things will change or they won't. And so, I mean, I can pick like a job that I've left where I'm like, no, and I actually don't admire or appreciate who I'm working with, especially the boss, right? It's like a selfish type of person. I'm like, that bleeds out, right? And I felt really good about leaving, and I was right, and I'd done a lot of things. So I'm like, oh, this is it, right? You can kind of see. And then in a relationship, I was like, okay, I don't want that. I don't want this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I removed myself and I communicated honestly. And I just left. Like I send love and I'm done. Like I'm not trying to text or trying to be friends right after. I just like a clean. And then time will go by and I'll be loving and nice, but it's either for me long term or it's not for me. And I love long term.
What are your signs when it's time to quit or leave?
All over the map. So I have quit with wild abandon. When like you quit with energy, you quit with that like life force of like, I know there's something better for me out there. Like it can be like this incredible act of kind of asserting that this is you in your life and you're not doing this anymore. And I have been terrible at quitting. I have like stayed with things way longer. So it's definitely a really hit and miss. But I do remember one job. So I had gone from being freelance, obviously doing what we all do in LA, is like do 100 different things and juggling like performing and lots of other stuff. And then I got a job, basically management position of a store, and for some money. It was a money job. It was always a money job. But I said to them, I'm really ready to give up the freelance life. I'm ready to commit. I'm ready to work with a team. Like I fed them the lines. Mm-hmm. And a couple of months later, I had to go into the office and say, so the job is amazing. It's just that I miss being a freelancer. I miss just taking my own holiday when it's not you, it's me. And that's when quitting this job actually turned into a breakup, because she almost climbed over the table towards me going, but what can we do? What can we do to keep you? And I was like, again, it's not you, it's me. I'm just not ready. I'm just, and I was like, oh my God, I'm a complete commitment phobe when it comes to work.
Yeah.
But it was super awkward. She came around, she started, like, her voice quavered, like, and like almost got really tearful. And I'm just like, yeah, it really felt like it was going to get very.
You have time for you, Glow?
I think sometimes I stay past the expiration date, and I think that's why sometimes I quit in that kind of like way, because sometimes extricating myself is so difficult that it almost has to be done. It feels like it's reckless, but it's more like survival in a way. Like I am like, it is very difficult, but in this situation, I am actually choosing myself, and sometimes that's messy.
Yeah.
But there've also been like, I've had jobs where like, I remember I was working at like Ruby Tuesdays one time, and they booked me on a double, and then the next day they tried to book me on another double, and I was like, I'm not coming in today. I'm not coming in ever again. Thank you, goodbye. And I just was like,
Final straw.
it was too many doubles, I just can't do doubles, so sometimes I'm able to just like do it, but then sometimes I stay past the expiration date, and it feels so difficult to leave that the only way to do it is to kind of like fling myself to the other side and then, deal with the fallout.
I think that I used to do that a lot more. Like, I would really wait till I was breaking, like, and then I didn't have a way back even or anything. So it was like, this has to be completely like done, versus like recognizing the signs early enough so that I didn't feel like I was overtaxing myself or filling myself with resentment because I kept trying to push through things that maybe shouldn't have been pushed through. And I think I've done that with both jobs and people. I've gotten better at it with jobs, but it's like my own self-care and my quality of life actually being an anchor for when and why I'm making the choice. I'm like, the last job I had to quit, well, not had to quit, but I chose to quit. Like, they told me the job was going to be one thing, that it wasn't going to be a lot of hours, that it wasn't going to require, turned out to be like more hours than what they said. I was constantly getting phone calls. I was constantly like having to then document all the phone calls I was getting while I was doing the job, while I was supposed to be driving around everywhere. And after a few days, it's so funny because the guy who trained me seemed so neurotic. And I was like, why is he so crazy? And then after doing the job for a few days, I said, this is why he's so crazy. And I eventually, and it was like a breakup too, because I really liked this company. They've been trying to get me back for a long time. I used to work for them. And I was like, this is not what y'all said, and it's stressing me out, and I can't do this. I was like going, I was stumbling over my word. I was like, I just cannot, this is not it. This is not it. This is not it. This is not it. I am not going to do this to myself. There has got to be something better, and I gotta go.
So I agree. I think that I'll take ownership for sure. For sometimes the agreements maybe weren't clear, right? Sometimes the agreements weren't clear. And I think that has to be very clear up front. And I think that's fair to both parties, like an energy exchange, right? Whatever small or big the relationship may be, or however long you work together or in a relationship, right? But there's also a point that I have to be treated with respect, right? There's a sense of appreciation and respect, and then a sense of growth or an evolution. And if that's not happening, then it feels, because I've gone past probably the expiration date in some things for sure, but then there's a point that you see things won't change, right? And then you're like, no, this is so clear that it's time to detach and let go.
Have you guys ever had regrets? Like, gotten out of something or quit something, and then on the other side wish that you'd made a different choice or hadn't quit when you quit?
I think earlier on, in forms of like, I used to read astrology charts, like so young, right? And there's certain things that I'm like, I still know how to do all these things and I still use them. But I think that it's interesting if you would have stayed with like certain passions,
Mhm.
when the time strikes, like when it's hot, right, or more cool. I think of smaller things like that that are still nurtured, but not like driven wholeheartedly, right, with all the attention and momentum. Even though, I mean, I still use it and I love it and I have workshops, etc. But is that what you're referring to? Things like,
Well, or relationships, like you broke up with somebody and you wish that you hadn't, or you left a job and you're like, oh shit, that would have been a great jumping off point to something. Like there's an audition I didn't take once because I was too afraid to sing. And when I found out later what the show was, I didn't even really need to have to be able to sing well to do what it was. And I wish I had taken the chance at it and not like run away from it.
yeah,
It did influence me so that later, whenever I had that kind of opportunity, even if I was afraid or I thought it was going to be a shitty audition, I would take it and try. But it was an opportunity with like a bigger theater company that I think would have opened up to other things had I been willing to take the leap. Which I guess is not exactly quitting, but kind of. It's like, you know, like I almost never turn down an audition. So it's like shutting down on something. I don't have that with people though. Like there's nobody like by the time I got to a breaking point with the people I've been with, I'm usually like, I'm looking back on it years later, like, oh, thank God.
mm-hmm. Totally.
So it's funny, like our associations with quitting, right? Because there can be quitting and losing. And then I guess the origin of quitting was actually around freedom and lightness. So like the idea of acquittal, you know, that how we see it. So we can see it as, you know, I'm going to quit these responsibilities, or I'm streamlining my focus, right? Like you can really kind of change it up, but I think there is such an association with don't be a quitter, and that being very similar to losing, that when we think about quitting, there's a grief that often comes with it. And you know, in there is that kind of like sometimes tied up regret, or that kind of it's a fear. There's a poem that I just love that's called The Art of Losing. I don't know. It's called One Art. And it's basically the art of losing isn't hard to master. Lose one thing every day, you know, and basically lose it faster. And she goes through like, you know, she loses her keys, her mother's ring, and then, you know, lose bigger, lose greater, houses, continents, countries, rivers, and this idea of, you know, how you view things as like, are they something that you hold on to, or are you at the point in your life that you're like, okay, I can let this go, and how you frame it, really.
I mean, that freedom part, I think, is true. That freedom, often when I have left relationships, I have had, there's been a mourning for letting go, but I have left as a sense of freedom and taking care of myself. So there has often been a point where I'm just like, I got out unscathed. I have myself, thank God, you know, there has been that kind of thing sometimes.
I think it's interesting, like what you're talking about the reframing, because I was just, as we were talking, I was thinking, like one of the quotes that my father used to always say that I do take very much so to heart around like perseverance is that you don't fail until you quit. And so it's like what I use around pursuing my dreams and my career and all that stuff. But I see it very differently around like my mental health and well-being, as far as like relationships and like just a job that's not my career. Yeah, I don't know. And I think that that's the way that I would have in the past, before me and my ex-husband, like that's how I saw marriage with him too, until certain things happen. It's like, no, this is like something you're just committed to forever, and you commit to moving through all of the ups and downs, and like it's the thing you get to the other side. And it's like, where do you find the balance, I guess?
Yeah.
I quite like the idea of sort of breaking it down, because I mean, some people use the percentages thing, like, am I happy 80% of the time and it's shitty 20%? Or am I only happy 20% of the time, it's shitty 80%? And then there's this kind of like going out into the world and trying to seek validation, like, well, it was this percent. Am I allowed to do this now? When actually, you know, sometimes I think I would like a day of just practicing just because, like just have a just because day. Like I want to do something just because, like maybe I want to quit just because, and there doesn't need to be any reason for it. And maybe that's, you know, I'm imagining a freedom that I don't think I have access to right now.
I think that feels like a wanting to have the experience of doing it and still remain having a sense of self-worth, and also that you're not, you know, sometimes like quitting could feel like, even if you've done it, sense of rejection, which obviously sense of rejection can feel like its own form of death, right? So you want to have the experience and know that you're resilient regardless, and nothing bad's going to happen. It might actually add some life. So it is actually fun to reframe, because even it's kind of like sometimes you wonder, what if, right? You're like, what if we went down that path, or what if, right? And I also think it's everything we've ever learned and experienced, there's a time and place for, right? And everything is working out for the best for us.
Mm-hmm.
And experiences and opportunities are abundant. So I think that it's all good, right? I think it's all good.
I mean, I think like when you're going through a period in your life where there is the hope and there is abundance, but when you're going through a period of depletion and actually shit is hitting the fan faster than you can even like, you know, document, that's when it gets really, really, really hard. And
Right.
also when you've had some close calls, like I was working at like a job with amazing health insurance that I was just about to quit to be a full-time yoga teacher. And I was doing all my additions, like, okay, how much would I need? Oh, I don't need health insurance, right? Like I lived in America without health insurance for 7 years. And if I'm looking after myself, I'm going to be fine. And I was like, oh, let's just go to the last doctor's visit while I have this amazing health insurance. And thank God I didn't quit, because my treatment for my cancer was, one, like I had amazing insurance. I was incredibly lucky. I had some of the best treatment in the world. But yeah, I was like right on the precipice. And like, I think once you've been there, you kind of realize how much you could lose. You do start to look at your decisions in a really different way. And I would love to go back to that kind of abundance, but I don't always feel that anymore.
You know what, though? I agree. I believe what you're saying is 100% true. And I have been there. I had no health. I surrendered. I hit rock bottom. I had no money, no health, no nothing, no support, and rebuilt myself from scratch alone. So all I'm saying is there's a sense of surrender and acceptance to let go of fighting. And then you have to have this other vision and this other, and I'm not, I mean, everybody's experiences are valid, but I have had nothing and been totally alone to see a better life for myself and healthy and happy, and created that.
I think some people have a different way of holding that. And I'm very much so like a joy manifestation person. And there's complexities when you're dealing with, like, if you're talking about, like, somebody may have all the gut feelings we have, they need to get out, but you're stuck in the middle of COVID and you don't have a job, and then where are you going to go? Or, you know, you've got kids and you've got to navigate a whole bunch of other stuff, or you've got this job and the risks that you're taking put you in a place that is really dangerous. Do you know what I'm saying? So like, I think that there are a lot of layers to the idea of quitting that aren't just about that immediate feeling. And I'm a very surrender and trust person too, but I'm a surrender and trust, but also like look and try and make a plan and then go that plan as far as you can, and then surrender to the rest of it. So that you can keep yourself safe and not in a position, because I think that there are times where I ended up ultimately being fine too, but other jobs where it's like making me sick to be in the job. Like I was so weighing that my body was getting sick. And I was like, I have to quit. And I couldn't get unemployment. I didn't know what I was going to do. It ultimately worked itself out, but it was a very, very scary leap, and not everybody can do that.
No. Yeah.
Wait, Gloria, what were you gonna say?
There are a couple things, like that poem that you were talking to me reminds me about like the idea of detachment more than quitting.
Yes.
To me, it's more about like detachment, not holding on to things with such rigor, and being able to practice letting go of things. And so that is what I take away from that poem. And I do have difficulty letting go of things. Like I definitely, like emotional connections or things that have sentimental value, I do. So I like the idea of detachment. And in some ways I'm pretty good with that. But in a lot of ways, I just like really struggle with that idea of like having detachment. So that's something really interesting. But the other thing that, what were you saying, Dee, before that? Because there was something that reminded me of.
About like the layers and making a plan as far as you can go and
Oh
surrendering.
yeah. So like I'm usually like an exit strategy kind of person. Like I like an exit strategy with everything. Like I walk into a restaurant and I immediately know how I would get out if some shit went down. You know, I'm always looking for an exit strategy. And even in jobs and in relationships, I've often like looked at where the back door is, you know. I don't think that's like a great part of my personality, but that is definitely there. And trying to do that less, you know, giving myself the freedom to leave when I want to leave, but not feeling like I have to, one, not be so invested so that it's not so hard to leave, because I'll cheat myself that way too.
Mhm.
I'll do like an 80% investment and a 20% to myself so that if I have to leave, it's not 100%, you know, it's a lot of math, but you know, the kind of games I play with my
About
mind.
the back door.
Yeah.
With relationships, I don't, or at least my experience of you has not been that you have that back door in the beginning. It's when, you know, kind of shit starts to hit the fan. Do you think that when you start noticing you're wanting to find the back door, that maybe that's a sign of something or a way to move so that it doesn't hit that breaking point thing? Or is that something that,
I mean, yeah, if I was like together, yeah, that's exactly what I would do. When I started looking for the exit, I'd be like, I might not be able to be here, but you know.
I mean, do you think it's that you might not be able to be there, or that there's something to work through around it? I know sometimes, and it can go either way with me. Sometimes it's the work through, sometimes it's I needed to have gone already.
I don't like to work, but I am learning. I am learning. So when I think Nikki asked, or someone asked, has anyone had regret? Like I was in a relationship, got out of the relationship and ended up back in the relationship. And right now, today, like I'm happier than I was before. So, and that's something you would never be able to, I would never have thought that was possible, because usually when I'm done, I'm done. I'm actually done before I'm done, usually. So that there could be an option of a 2.0 is not something that I really thought was possible, but maybe it is. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think like for me, that same thing with the breaking points thing, what I've realized that is if when I start feeling the things heading towards that breaking point, if either I'm actually willing to leave at that point, because sometimes that changes people's behavior, because I have codependent tendencies. So the people that I end up with are like the puzzle piece match for that kind of thing. So I think what I've realized over the years is that part of why they may not have believed I was going to leave is because they see me as somebody that's going to always be there. And so, and what they actually need is for me to actually demonstrate that I would actually be willing to leave before I'm completely out, so that the behaviors or something they can get that it needs to change. But usually I would be trying to hold on and reassure them instead of actually being like, no, I actually need to set a boundary here. And I think the reassurance of them had them stay in the same behavior till I was like, no, now I got to be ghost. Yeah. Whereas if I set a much firmer boundary way sooner, then I might not have experienced the same dynamic in the relationship.
Yeah.
Interesting. You know, you were talking about detachment. And I suppose like even earlier in the relationship, right? Like if you had sort of shown that willingness to detach, but I wonder if detachment sometimes flips. So I remember walking into a job that I hated, and I walked in, but I wasn't actually thinking of anything, and my brain was totally blank. And I walked into the building and my face was wet. I was like, what the hell is this? And I was actually bored to tears. Didn't know it was a thing. Had no idea it was a thing. I wasn't crying. I wasn't upset. I was so detached that the tears were almost like my body going, come back. And so I think that sometimes what can happen is that there is like kind of a healthy detachment or a willingness to detach that's like in the bounds of putting in boundaries. And then what can happen is you start to detach from yourself when you're in it in order to survive something.
Yeah.
So that was the survival technique. And that kind of detachment is the one that's really corrosive to your soul, to your confidence, to everything. But it can be really hard to figure out what kind of detachment and where it lives, and if it's going to make your face wet when you're not expecting it to.
Oh, okay. So what are like our takeaways from what we've
I mean, honestly, you guys are the last, I can't help but think about it. We've been talking about first and second chakra stuff. So the sense of feeling not afraid, right? To the sense of feeling acceptance and surrender. And then the act of detachment is a form of letting go. And the reason there's of course a duality to it. There is the sense of my boundaries have been violated, right? And then there's the fact of actually letting go and going with the flow and feeling your energy move through, which is where your health thrives. But in order to feel grounded, so this is, I everything we've talked about, I'm like first and second chakra. But I think what I've taken away is it's always perception play for me, in the sense of I'll trust my intuition. And I agree, it's to me like the art of reframing. Like, how can I look at this? Like, it's kind of funny. I was even in the room. This is kind of a random metaphor, I guess that's what it is. But we were outside and I came in and there was a fly and I couldn't find it, right? In the kitchen, because the door was open for a second. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to scoot back in the room and take in the whole room, right? So that I could see better. And I think that it's the art of awareness to see objectively and then do what's best for you while being loving and communicating is really allowing the best for everybody.
Yeah. This detachment is something so interesting. We're talking about this and we're talking about relationships and jobs. I've been thinking about this with my animal. I just put my cat down 3 days ago.
Oh.
And the idea of reframing, of being able to like let go and like just that idea of just like being able to let go in a way that feels loving and healthy. And yeah.
Yes.
So that's what I'm like.
Yes.
That idea of like letting go in a loving way.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I have a much bigger challenge with that around grief than I do about the other things. But I think it's the balance. Like, I think there's some of that reframing too, but I think there truly is a balance. And like and I do think ultimately it's a reframing, but that like it can go either way. Like what you were saying, Glo, like it's not something that you would have expected from what you've experienced in the past, and that it can turn out a whole different way than you think, but that can go either way. So you like have an opportunity, and that you can balance it. And also I think too, honoring your grief is important though, like honoring how you feel, honoring the grief, honoring the fear, because I think that unless you are willing to look at it, you can't move through it and reframe it. Like I think like trying to push it away too soon doesn't allow for the journey forward either. I think we have to honor what we feel.
I want just to add on to that with you. When we join love with something energetically, when we join love with something, it is free to leave. It's free to leave in a very loving way.
Yeah.
You know, I was trying to think of things and how much love I'd given them and where they were allowed to go just then. And then I realized that every time I leave somewhere that I live, and this sounds really silly, and I've been doing this ever since I moved out of home, when all the furniture's out, I walk around the rooms and I thank them.
Yeah. Sweet.
So yeah, the only time that didn't go so well was when I had to leave this terrible place I lived in North Hollywood, where I had a repeated prowler, and like the police basically told me to move out of my house, and I went to like lie down on the floor and have this moment of thank you, and then you could hear the road really loudly outside, and people were always smashing bottles on the street outside. and I heard this car and then this smash, and I was like, you know what? So this, no, no, this place does not get the thank yous.
Yeah.
I'm out. But yeah, like I think honoring your experience, and I think on both ends of the spectrum. So honoring when you have that gut punch telling you now, right? And honoring that. And also when it's not as glamorous, when you're like, actually, I can't get out now because finances, because life, because responsibilities.
Yep.
And also honoring that that process might take a bit longer, it might not look as impetuous, but actually even the slow plotting will still get you to where you want to go. Love a good plot.
Good.
Strategy.
Yep.
Strategic.
Sometimes it's baby steps.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Awesome, ladies.
Cheers.
Are we gonna quit each other now?
We're going to quit this Zoom now.
Just the
With
Zoom.
love.
But y'all ain't going nowhere.
Thanks.
I'm holding y'all in my life forever, though. Thank you.
Yes. I love you.
I
Thank
love
you.
you.
Cheers.
Cheers.